Ghostbusters Afterlife is directed by Jason Reitman and stars McKenna Grace, Finn Wolfhard, Carrie Coon, Paul Rudd, and among others. And in this story, it takes place in a small town in Oklahoma where a girl played by McKenna Grace and her family end up going out there, and she discovers that there's a connection between her family and the Ghostbusters, and also discovers a secret about her grandfather's legacy that is left behind. And not going to go into too much detail, but if you've seen from the trailers, it pretty much shows that there's some ghosts that get on the loose, and McKenna Grace and Finn Wolfhard and a couple other newcomers that come in, they end up having to team together in order to have to take down the Ghostbusters, or take down the ghosts and everything. Now, here's a little backstory. Now, growing up, I've always been an avid fan of the Ghostbusters films, and to this day, I consider the original film one of my all-time favorite classics. And finally, after so many years, I finally own both the first two films on this double feature disc set, and even this day, like I can't get enough of them because both the first and second one, they have so much charm of being coming out in the '80s and everything, and just having so much like funny, banter with the cast and everything, and it just had so much like fun moments between all the different ghosts that they come across, and a lot of the way that the story beats tackle with them having to fight the different supernatural forces. And I know the second one gets a bad rap from being inferior to the first one, but even to this day, I actually consider it to be a pretty underrated sequel, and I actually really consider it like almost. Like, it's not as good as the first, but I still find it a pretty solid sequel, and one that still brings back the original cast and everyone back, and doing new things with the ghosts. And while it does rehash some the story beats from the first movie, it still makes it seem like they were trying to mix it up with certain things that they had with different ghosts going along with it. And I thought the comedy still worked with with everyone involved too again, and then. For many years, there was always talk about them doing a Ghostbusters 3, and sadly, the problem, to go into just a little bit of detail, was that for many years there were script changes that go around, and there was a lot of talk about Dan Aykroyd wanting to have to try to do a third one, where especially there was a script they had in mind where it was Ghostbusters Hellbent or Ghostbusters Go to Hell or something, which they never they tried to do. Getting around for many years, but the problem was that they couldn't get Bill Murray involved because he was so reluctant to come back to do another one after the second one. He kind of felt that it really tankered his way of seeing the franchise, and so that was the biggest issue, was trying to get Bill Murray back. But in between that, we did get that cartoon series that came out, The Real Ghostbusters, which I've only watched just a couple episodes of that, and I've actually kind of liked that show. I just need to watch more of it, because I finally watched it for the first time as it came as there's a couple episodes on the bonus disc of Ghostbusters 2 on here, which is fun. And then there was another one that came out called the Extreme Ghostbusters that had you had like a new group of Ghostbusters that were being trained by Egon. I never watched that show, but I hear that it's also not too bad as well. And so, for many years, I always kind of wondered if they ever actually would get around to doing another Ghostbusters film. And then it wasn't until 2009 when we actually had it to where they got most of the original cast back to reprise the roles for the video game that came out. And even this day, after playing it recently, I still find that to be essentially the third movie that we never got. That they essentially use elements of the script of Ghostbusters Go to Hell into the game, making it essentially Ghostbusters 3 for the longest time. But then after that game came out, it sparked a whole lot of more interest of them wanting to continue to make another Ghostbusters movie, live action. And since they were still trying to get Bill Murray on board, and there was a lot of back and forth between him wanting to come back, not wanting to come back, it was all having a big, long hiatus. And sadly, when we lost Harold Ramis in I believe it was, I'm trying to remember, was it 2015? Or no, I think it was 2014 or 2015, one of the two. But when Harold Ramis died, it really felt like it was one of those things where the franchise probably didn't need to come back after that. And I did kind of feel like, after that it was probably a little too late if they were going to continue with doing another one. Because they actually did have plans that I heard that they were actually going to get Rick Moranis to come back to reprise his role as Louis Tully from the other films, but he said that he would only come back if they actually had all of them involved again when Harold Ramis was still alive. And so after after the third film was scrapped, they decided the studio decided to pretty much move forward with or without Dan and Aykroyd's involvement and everything, and so they ended up continuing with doing the reboot that came out 5 years ago. And the less said about that, the better, because me and Eddie did a review of that movie, a rant on that 5 years ago, and I know that one got liked by critics, and it has its fans, but I'm still not the biggest fan of that film. It's one of those movies that, despite going past all the controversy and stuff, the less said the better, as you can go back and listen to our rant on that, because that movie was just such a pointless and such a inept type of way of doing a reboot that really it was like nails on a chalkboard bad. And so after that movie flopped at the box office, and then after a couple years to go apart, they decided that they wanted to pretty much finally get us the sequel that we always wanted to, and they ended up having Ivan Reitman come back and basically trying to being a producer, and then they ended up getting his son Jason Reitman to fill in his footstep as a director. And so when I started hearing the news that we were going to get Ghostbusters Afterlife, I couldn't be more excited. Like, we were finally going to be able to see a proper sequel to the original movies again. And while it is very sad, since we don't have Harold Ramis anymore to come back to actually continue the franchise and everything, the idea of them actually wanting to do an actual sequel following the original films and kind of do it more like a we've been on this trend where we're kind of getting more like a soft reboot, so to speak, with like movies like Jurassic World, the Star Wars Force Awakens, all that bring back the legacy sequels. I kind of already knew going into that's what they were going for. And one of the things that got me interested as well was the fact that they were trying to make it to where they were sticking to mostly practicals, and they were doing like some things that kind of made it seem like it was going like its own original take on it, that was trying to expand more on the Ghostbusters film that we haven't seen before, instead of taking place in New York. And so after finally seeing the film, I can honestly say that I did quite enjoy this film. It does have its flaws in some aspects with the writing, but I will say that I thought this was a very welcome return to the franchise, and I really liked the movie a lot. To get my pros out of the way, the cast I thought were all great. McKenna Grace, I thought she was fantastic. I've only seen her in some things. I've only seen her in I, Tonya, and she was she played the younger version of Carol Danvers in Captain Marvel, but she's become a very talented actress, and I think she did a very great job in this. And she was definitely the heart of the movie, McKenna Grace was. And I appreciate that she was playing, an outcast that's just trying to fit in and everything with, school and all that. And she has that kind of, nerdy kind of, like, she's really into technology and all that. I also like the rest of the cast too. I like Finn Wolfhard, but I will say that I did have problems on the writing aspect with this character, because it felt like he was kind of more like take it or leave it as far as where his character goes in the film, because it really felt like his character didn't really add a whole lot to the actual story. But I still thought he did a good job, and ever since I've seen him in Stranger Things, I know he's been kind of more typecast into playing that kind of role, like from that, and then also in in the It movies and things like that. But I think that the kid's actually becoming a really good actor. He has a lot of a good future ahead of him, and so he was good. And then I also got one of the biggest standouts for me was actually Paul Rudd. And I mean, I've always liked Paul Rudd as a comedian in every film that he's been in, and a lot of movies that he's been in, and he's no different here. He's funny when he's funny, and he does have some really good moments where he's trying to where he's spending time with McKenna Grace's mother, who's played by Carrie Coon in the film. And I just like the way that he has his usual funny nice guy motif that he has in every movie. And and one of the other biggest standouts for me, most surprisingly, was this new character they introduced that's named Podcast, and that's literally his name in the film, where he's actually a podcaster, and he's basically trying to get the scoop on because he learns about of what's going on in the town and everything, and he's trying to like get more information about what's going on with all these different supernatural beings and stuff. And he did have me laughing quite a few times in the film, and I thought him and McKenna Grace were really good. They had great chemistry with each other. Now, to get into some other pros, I will say that I really do like the way that they mix a lot of the practical effects in this, because there are some cool things that they mix with combining practical effects for some of the ghosts that they bring up, and getting a good blend with CGI on top of it. Now, there is some noticeable CGI that I'll get into later that becomes pretty glaring and doesn't really work too well, but the practicals they use for the most part, especially with some of the close-up shots and some of the ways that these ghosts look, they actually really do look pretty neat. And there is some other things that they use, especially toward the these chase sequences that I think were really well timed in the action department. And one of the things I also got to really appreciate them is they do expand the lore on the Ghostbusters mythology in this, to where they add some things that add more layers to what we originally got in the first film. And the little callbacks and references that they have to the actual original movies, I thought were pretty cool in some scenes. And it does kind of I enjoy it, but it's to an extent with that, because I'll get into some of my cons of that a little later. But one of the other biggest strong points I have the most is not only was it great to hear some of the musical cues that were from the other Ghostbusters movies, but some of the but the other thing that this real movie holds the most is I like how it's set in a more secluded, smaller town, and it feels a lot more closer to home for me. The biggest strong point for me the most was actually the heart in the movie is really, when it gets into its third act, I think is really where it holds strong, where a lot of the nostalgia and a lot of the actual the actual heartwarming moments that really touched me in a good way. I won't go into detail, but let's just say that what they did, I thought, was a very, very, very it paid a lot of respect to the original films. And I really got to get a kick out of what they do with it in the third act. And what they also set up for, I thought it got me really, really, it left a huge smile on my face on what they do. Again, I don't want to go into detail, but just see it. It's a blast, especially in that third act. Now, to get into some of the cons, I will say that from a writing standpoint, there is some things that they leave out that's not really fully explored too much. Like, for example, let's just say that there's a villain they set up with. Now, this villain has some good things that they add to the actual story of Ghostbusters that I enjoy, but at the same time, it did feel like the villain that they set up in the film is very underutilized. I'll leave it there because there's too much to go into it without having to go to spoilers. And one of the other things I will say that they leave out is that they set up some stuff with Finn Wolfhard's character where it's him trying to get involved with this girl that he meets that's at this restaurant. And I felt like their subplot didn't really go anywhere, and it could have been completely cut out to where it didn't really have a whole lot of time for development for it the way that it was going along. Now maybe there's something that it'll set up maybe in the future for it, but at the same time it didn't really add much to the actual story itself. And one of the other things I will say too that kind of had the movie where it was kind of falling short with its writing was, well, let's just say that there's some stuff in the film where they rehash things from the original film, and it has to do with going it with the plot. Now, that was the same issue that I noticed that Ghostbusters 2 also had as well. So it seems to me that like they're kind of rehashing plot point beats that are from the first film that they haven't really tried to steer away from. But this mainly comes into the last act of the film, because the first half, they actually do, the way that it was going on and everything, I did enjoy the family dynamic of where it's going with and all that, because when they deal with that, I think it really adds a whole lot of good layers to the story. It's just that when it gets to its third act, it feels like, it's trying to go into familiar territory where it's almost like they were playing it very safe. And that's the one thing that I think that held it back from being very great like it was going for. And there's also some other noticeable CGI in the film that they don't really render too much with, but I will say that this was a welcome return to form for the franchise, and it does make me excited to see what they do in the future with this, because I do want to see more of this universe going in the future. And so with that being said, I will say that where the heart is there and everything that's been going on with the movie, I am going to give the movie with the third act alone that really upped it up for me a lot. I'm going to give the movie a low compelling grade on the Film Freaks meter. So for those of you who've also seen Ghostbusters Afterlife and also the other Ghostbusters films as well, let me know in the comments below what you thought about it. And thank you so much for watching. Stay safe, and I'll see you in my next review. I'll see you later.